Okay, we ready? So tonight I've written up here the end. Take your Bibles and turn to Genesis 1:1 and then get Revelation 22:21. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at the beginning and the end. It seems like an odd place to start of talking about the end when we are discussing the topic of evolution. And that's what we're studying in these Wednesday night studies. There's so much material about this. I'm not sure how far I'm going to go with it. I'm just trying to decipher. I know it can get overwhelming and boring at times, but so many times I think that we hear about evolution and we say, oh man, I don't believe that evolution stuff, but we really don't know why we don't believe it. And so I'm trying to equip you so that, because there are lots of people that you interact with day in and day out who do believe in evolution. If you ever bring it up to them, they may not be hardcore evolutionists like a typical scientist is, but they may be one of these who believe, well, that's really the way the Lord did it, which isn't much different. I mean, that's like a first cousin, or maybe even closer, a brother to hardcore evolution. And when I mean hardcore evolution, what I define that is someone who really believes that it started with nothing and there was this little spark and eventually it's a big bang and then all this just showed up over billions and billions of years. I'm going to lose some people right here. The earth, and I know definitely we're going to study this, the earth is likely less than 10,000 years old. Now, you didn't read that in one science book. Every science book you've ever said has said the earth is 4.5 billion years old. I mean, that's the date we give it. And I probably said that myself. But the evidence, what's the evidence? Not guesses, not theories. One guy can guess and say it's 4.5 billion years old. I can guess and say it's 3.6 trillion years old. But where's the evidence? And the evidence is overwhelming that we have a young earth. And God just made it look old. Now we'll get to that in another time. I bet started there, but I don't want to. I want to start with the end. So what's the first verse say? You tell me. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. So that's a hard period. Let's just stop right there. We know what the next verse says. It's all void and all this kind of stuff, and then God starts. But we'll save that for another time. Let's go to the last verse of the Bible. What's the last verse of the Bible say? The grace of the Lord Jesus Christ be with you all. Is that what it says? Amen? Yeah. All right. So there we have the beginning and the end. Now, who's telling you that? God is. That's not a loaded question. That's not a trick question. Who tells you that? God tells you that. Can you trust that? Well, of course you can. And how do we trust that? Because he proves himself trustworthy. God does not ask you to trust him on just a dime, He has to prove himself. Just like anybody who comes up to you, say you walk up to a used car salesman, he says, trust me, trust me. Now, how are you going to trust the guy? Because he's sold you cars in the past and he's not beat you. He sold you a good product for a good price. And so you go back to Tom again and say, yeah, man. But he has to prove himself. Well, God's no different. He understands that. And so he proves himself over and over and over again. Then when he asks you to believe something that's unbelievable, if he believes you to ask something that's beyond you or out into the future, you say, sure, Lord, I believe you. You've never lied to me. So that's somebody you can trust. True? True. So when we come to the end, that's a problem for evolutionists. That's my whole point. See, evolutionists guess at where you came from. And it's a theory. It's just a theory. They don't have proof for it. It's just a guess. And in that way, both a creationist and an evolutionist have to have faith. Now, our faith is in God. Their faith is in science. And I'll say this, it's science falsely so-called. That's what 1 Timothy calls it. That's what God calls it. If it's true science, then it's going to be proven to be reliable all the time. Blood work is science. They can take my blood work and watch my blood improve or get worse. Blood pressure is science. It's proven to be accurate over and over and over again. Now, you may get a bad reading sometime. I've taken blood pressure in this arm and get one reading, and take blood pressure in this arm and get another reading. I've taken it through a shirt that will drop my blood pressure 50 points. Just the shirt. Take the shirt off, perfect. So you see, but it isn't the machine. It's my body and what I surround it with, and I have my legs crossed and all the variables, you know. But it's not the machine. The machine's trustworthy. So God's trustworthy. The problem with evolutionists is, let's go back. They can tell you, at least in their opinion, in their theories, how it begins. How's it going to end? They don't have a clue. And they don't even go there. Their whole focus is the beginning. How did it start? And they have all theories about millions of years ago and how you one time were just a little amoeba, a one-cell animal, and then eventually become. Okay, if you're a real scientist, you're not going to take me seriously. But let me just fast forward it for you. So you became a tadpole, and then you became a monkey, and then over a certain period of time, you became a man. So you eventually came from the animals. And recently, they've just discovered that your DNA is closest to a baboon. So does that make you feel better? You're a baboon. At least that's your great-grandparents. Baboons. So here's the question. Job 14:14 asks this question. If a man die, shall he live again? So you could even make the point, I suppose, you could make the point, okay, I'm here. How did I get here? Okay, we could go back and search that and figure out your birthday and how you got here and do a 23andMe and get your all DNA and where you came from. Okay, we can figure that. But you're here now. And your ending is much more important than your beginning. We spend so much time on ancestry and digging into the past that the question's this one. You're living and you're going to die. Are you going to live again? Evolution never deals with that. Never deals with it. In fact, if you were to look for a religion, if you're an evolutionist and you want to be religious, the closest religion that will adopt your philosophy is Buddhism. So you have to become a Buddhist. That's where I suggest you go. You're an evolutionist. Look into it. It might float your boat. Because an evolutionist can be a Buddhist because the Buddhist believes that you just reincarnate over and over and over again. You know, you go into the grave, and then depending on how you lived your life and how good you were, and it's called karma. We've adopted that into our language. Karma. So we've adopted karma to be, okay, if I do good, then I'm going to get good. And there's a biblical principle for that, certainly, that if we sow to the Spirit, we will of the Spirit reap life everlasting. If we sow to the flesh, we will of the flesh reap corruption. But that's not a hard fixed rule because you can't take out of the equation the grace of God. There's many things I've sown to my flesh I've never reaped. So thank God for that. But, so you take that as being a principle. So the reincarnationist says, okay, if I've lived a good life and I've done the right thing, I mean, you folks, at least if we're reincarnationists, let me brag on you. You've done pretty good for yourself because you used to be a monkey, or you used to be an ant, or you used to be a skunk. And imagine how far you've come from being a skunk. So if you do real bad in this life, you know, you're a bad person and you just do really bad, then next time you may come back not quite as good as you are last time, and next time you might come and you'll be a drug addict. And if you don't do good with that, then next time you may come back as an elephant. And so the reason that Buddhists won't kill their animals, cows particularly, is because it might be grandmother. Now, see, if I'm doing stand-up comedy, that's hilarious. Because that's what evolutionists will do. Evolutionists will say things and you just have to go, that's ludicrous. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. But that's true. That's what a Buddhist does. So really, Buddhism and evolution have things in common. But what we find out is Genesis 1:1, in the beginning God created the heaven and the earth. Genesis 1:26, and God said, let us make man in our own image, after our own likeness. And that's what God did. So as God goes through these things, we have this situation where man being uncomfortable with God's power, that's one thing they don't like. Talking about evolutionists, they don't like God's power. And the thing that really keeps them up at night is they don't like God's judgment. They don't like it when God says, every idle word a man shall speak, you give account thereof in the day of judgment. They don't like that. They don't like the fact that Revelation chapter 20 says, and death and hell gave up their dead, and they all appear at this great white throne judgment. And the books were opened, and they were judged out of those things written in the books. And then you know what happens? They're cast into the lake of fire, which burneth forever and ever. Oh, no, 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 no. I don't know what the end is, but it sure ain't that. I don't know what's going to happen to me. I'm probably just going to the ground and I'm going to come back over and over and over again, or I'm just going to die and I'm going to die like a dog. Man, isn't that comforting? You're working, you've got a graduate degree from Vanderbilt or Harvard or Yale or the University of Tennessee, and you do all this work and you get your degree and you're a scientist and you're working in a lab, and somebody says, well, what's going to happen to you? Where are you going to be in 100 years? I'm going to be in the ground in the dirt and nobody's going to care about me. I mean, it causes you to be sad if that's all you had to look forward to. But that's where science leads them. So without any instruction, without any guidance, without any guardrails, without anything for them to really be able to put themselves up to. Now, let me say, in a caveat of that, I'm not saying that evolutionists are evil people or murderers or thieves. They're good people as far as morals go. But if you get rid of all judgment and you get rid of all truth and you get rid of all what's right and what's wrong, and it's just left up to what everybody thinks, then you're inviting chaos. Because it's going to bring chaos. We're seeing chaos in this country because people don't respect laws anymore. That's what it is. We don't have that trouble here. You know why? People here respect laws. But in many places they don't. And it's dangerous to live in a place like that. So without just instruction, without any kind of influence, then that man is going to fail. Because man can certainly show himself at the worst. So what's the alternative? Well, the alternative is God. And what does God do? God writes his words in a book. That one right there. And that book gives you precepts and laws and says, if you'll listen to these, if you'll obey these, if you'll do these, then thou shalt make thy way prosperous, and thou shalt have good success. Now, good people who follow the Bible doesn't mean you're not going to have trouble. Okay? But I guarantee you, if you don't follow this book, you will have trouble. And you'll have trouble for all the wrong reasons. You want to have trouble for all the right reasons. You want to have trouble because God dumps it on you because he thinks he can trust you and he's going to put you through the fiery trial of your faith. You don't want to be put through troubles because God's having to whoop you and take you to the woodshed and try to get you right with him. And you certainly don't want to go wrong and the Lord just say, I've done all I can do. I'm going to leave you to your own devices. Oh God, please don't ever leave me to my own devices. Guide me and help me and strengthen me and lead me the whole way. Now, we're not going to suggest by this, God in the book, that a person doesn't have the right to think any way they want to think. We would never, ever suggest that an evolutionist doesn't have the right to be dumb. They have every right in this world, at least in this country, to be as dumb as a rock if they want to be. They say, I believe in evolution. Man, you believe in evolution. They believe in reincarnation. Man, believe whatever you want to believe. And I'm really liberal about that because I don't want anybody to tell me what to believe. Because as soon as I try to tell somebody what they ought to believe, I know what's going to happen. As soon as they get the power, they're going to tell me what I have to believe. Just go look at Nazi Germany. It's pretty soon you're just all having to believe the same thing. So God gives us a free will, and he gives us direction. Now, suppose you have this sailor, and he's going to take you on an ocean sail. And one of the things you read about the instructions and the capability of this captain is that when it gets dark and stormy, he does not believe in using instruments or following any star. He's just going, well, whatever way the wind takes us, whatever way we go, I mean, we're going to be okay. Trust me. That guy's not captain in my ship. And I'm not getting anybody who I care for letting them on that ship, because that ship's going to crash and it's going to wreck and it's going to sink. No, every pilot in every airplane and every captain of every ship that has any sense is going to follow the guidelines. I wouldn't trust a preacher for 10 cents. I wouldn't go sit warm myself in the pew if he didn't know where he was going when he died. You think about that. Because there's lots of people who go and listen to preachers every Sunday, and that preacher doesn't have any idea where he's going. Can you imagine coming up to me and asking me directions, say, hey, could you give me directions to Lobeville? I think so. I think you go down here and you turn left, right out here, you turn left. And when you get to the water, just park your car and swim. And if you make it, then when you get to the other side, maybe you can find a telephone and get directions so somebody knows what they're doing. Miss Age? You're not going to trust a guy like that. You know what? I know I'm going to heaven. I'm sure of it. I don't have a doubt in it. I've not had a doubt in years. Can I tell you how to go to heaven? Would you listen to somebody like that? Absolutely, I'm going to listen to somebody like that. Because we have a book and we have direction. And so in this, God has given us directions and he's given us this way. So I know that by reading and listening to someone talk, I can pretty soon figure out where they're coming from. I've read a lot of evolution recently about what they believe so that I can inform you intelligently and logically and not talk out of the side of my head so I lose credibility. But even as I watch preachers and listen to preachers and read preaching and read books, no matter what book I read, it doesn't take me very long in listening. You listen to me and you'll be able to figure out at some point who's influenced me in the past. I've had a lot of preachers influence me. One of the biggest influences on my life was C.H. Spurgeon. I learned to preach by reading Spurgeon. So if you listen to me long enough, you'll hear Spurgeon. And that's the way with everybody. So who is influencing the evolutionist? Well, what they've got is they've got these little wicks. And some of them along the way, because they wanted to kick God out, we've got to get God out of this. And we've got to get judgment out of this. We've got to get Christianity out of this because those people are fanatics. We just got to get rid of them. So one day somebody just lit this little candle and it started to burn. Oh, we've got light. And then they go along and they give that little light to another light. And then that light would shine and maybe they get thousands or 10,000s of lights. And then they're looking around and saying, can we find the source of where this light come from? And none of them's got a clue. And yet you open that book and it tells you the very first words. Very first words. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And you're not left with any searching around and going, okay, how do we find our way out of here? And bumping into walls and being like in a maze. I'm going to give you a couple of examples. Marsupials are the animals that have pouches. The only one in North America is the possum. Now, for those who don't know, this is silent. Don't ever say opossum, because it's silent. And you're not just, of course, you're being Southern, but you're being right in Southern when you talk about a possum. Possum crossed my road. Good. Not an opossum. So the possum in North America and the kangaroo in Australia. These are strange little animals. Let's talk about the possum. So this possum, when it's going to have babies, it will produce these babies. And I don't really know how to draw it, so I'm just going to try to illustrate it. These little things are born, and they are blind, they are deaf, and no hair. And the mama doesn't even know they've been born. Now that's strange to you ladies, because if you've had a baby, you know you've had a baby. So they can have anywhere from maybe 7 to 12 of these little creatures. And they just, now you would naturally think if everything, let me get the word up here. If everything, evolution, if everything is evolution, if everything is just chance, then what would you think would happen to these little creatures? She's walking along. She doesn't know she's had a baby. And these things can't talk, they can't see, they've got no hair. They're dumb. What would you think would happen? Well, you would think that they would fall to the ground. You would think at least one of them would, if we're just going by chance. But no, they don't fall to the ground. They began to crawl up. All the way up. She don't even know they're there. They're so tiny. Just crawl all the way up. And then they fall in her pouch. How do they know to do that? As soon as they fall in the pouch, they begin looking for a nipple, which remarkably, she doesn't know they're there, which remarkably that nipple enlarges and attaches one of those little goobers to the nipple, and it starts to feed and grow for months. And somewhere along the way, this possum goes, oh, I've had babies. You know who did that? God did that. You know why he did that? So that you know he's God. That can't happen by chance. I'm going to give you a lot more of examples of that in the coming weeks. But let's talk about the kangaroo. Kangaroo is another one of these little animals with a pouch. And when that kangaroo has babies, and they get into the pouch, much like the possum, when they get into the pouch, that mama produces two kinds of milk. She produces milk for her brand new babies, and she produces another kind of milk for little Joey over here who's flipping beside her going along. That would be like, forgive me, but that would be like one woman's breast producing formula and another breast producing vitamin D milk. Isn't that something? You say, who did that? Oh, it's just over the years and years and years and years. You know, that kangaroo used to be a monkey. And sometime along the way, no, it wouldn't be a monkey. Monkeys became men. It was probably a bluegill or whale or something, you know. Of course, that just is not possible unless you believe that we could take a tornado. How many tornadoes would it take going through a junkyard to produce a brand new car? And if it's not just one tornado, then let's make it, we'll be generous, let's make it 100. 100 tornadoes, would that produce one? How about 1,000? 10,000? 100,000? See, there's this thing about statistics that's really peculiar. Somebody will say, well, there's a 1 in 1,000 chance of that. And if it doesn't happen, then the statistics get worse. Okay? So if it doesn't happen in 1 in 1,000, and you've done it 1,000 times, it still hadn't happened, then at some point it becomes 1 in 10,000. What if you do it 10,000 times and it doesn't happen? Okay, now we're at 100,000. What if it doesn't happen in 100,000? Then you're at 1,000,000, right? And then the lottery takes place, and what's your chances of winning? I don't ever play the lottery. It'd probably ruin me if I won. I hope I win someday, but I don't ever play. So if I win, it's really going to be a story. It means somebody played for me without my permission. But the chances of winning the lottery are like 1 in 300. There's more chances to win the lottery, at least one of these last ones, than there are people in the United States. You say, well, somebody won. Well, okay, somebody won. So your chances are 350 million. But if it doesn't happen in 350 million, you have to roll it to the next week. See what's happening? So it eventually gets to the point, if you're logical, you eventually get to the point, if it never happens, then you get to the point of 0. It will never happen. Are we there? Yeah. Is there a 0 in infinity chance that will never happen? Yeah. What about this? If you believe this is chance and this is chance, then you have to believe that at some point you can take a tornado and turn it into a new car. Therefore, you have to believe that foolishness is the Siamese twin of wisdom. They're both the same. And then you have to believe that truth is the same as a lie. You see where it leads you? There's no truth. There's no standard. You just live any way you want to live, believe anything you want to believe, and in the end, it really doesn't matter. That's evolution. Because the most important thing about evolution you want to know is not how it started. How's it going to end? Right? Is there any more important question that a man can ask or a woman can ask, a child can ask? If a man die, shall he live again? Job asked that question 1,800 years before Jesus Christ. So that's about 4,000 years ago he asked that question. And it's still the most important question a human being individually can ask himself. Because that question will lead, yep, you can live again. And that question will lead, well, where do I get life? And that will lead you to Jesus Christ. Job's purpose in asking that question and God having him ask that question is to lead you to his son and his Savior, Jesus Christ. So an evolutionist, I meant to bring a hat. Anybody got a hat? Anybody bring a hat? Probably not. So I meant to bring a hat. So an evolutionist is like a magician. So a magician gets before his audience. You've probably seen a magician before. He gets before his audience and he has a hat. And he may go out in the audience just by random and grab a hat. And with that hat, he reaches in and he pulls out something. And the crowd just goes, oh, man. That's amazing. But if you got any sense about you, you know he didn't pull anything out of that hat that he didn't first put in there. Now, I'm coming to a point. Follow the point. Do you agree with me? He cannot possibly pull anything out of that hat. I don't care if it's a rabbit. I don't care if it's a rhinoceros. Whatever he puts in that hat, he's going to pull out. If he didn't put anything out, he can't pull anything out. You agree with me 100%? Okay. The way he gets away with that is he distracts you. he's doing something over here, and while he's doing something over here, he's doing something here. The old point of the hand is quicker than the eye, which isn't true. But it's still a mantra they use. The hand's quicker than the eye. But all they're doing is they're doing this flashy stuff. So that's exactly what an evolutionist does. The evolutionist begins doing these things, and he tries to get you concentrating over here. And while you're concentrating over here, he puts laws in. Newton's laws. Whatever law. I don't care what law. Put the law in here. But you're not seeing it because you're over here, because he's talking to you about rock strata and the date of the earth and all this stuff. And then you look back and he goes, well, look, the law. And while you're looking at the law, yeah, the laws of gravity, the law, then he puts in life. And then he pulls life out of that. Say, see, we got life from law. Well, where'd you get law from? You got law from life. And you're going, oh, that's just amazing. But it's all a trick. Because we know where life came from. And we know where the law came from. See, you've got no problem. You go to night, rest like a baby. Put your head on your pillow and go to sleep. Now, you may have some worries, you may have concerns. Let me tell you one thing not to be concerned about. Where did life come from? You don't have to worry about that at all. That's all settled. Because God settled it. It's done. I'm going to close by telling you about this little guy. I think that's Malay. I didn't look up how to pronounce it, but I'm just going to call it Malay. If that's wrong, then you just fix it. But I think that's Malay. That's a little bird over in Australia. Now, this is a weird little guy. Because what he does, in about May or June of every year, he goes out to the beach and he digs this pit with his claws, digs this pit out. And it's always about 3 feet by 6 feet. And then he goes and gathers vegetation all around and puts it in this pit, and the heat of the sun begins to make that stuff go rotten. Gets up over 100 degrees. When it gets up over 100 degrees, he calls his wife over. Hey, honey, come here. And right in front of that pit, in that heat, I imagine it probably doesn't have a very good smell, but that doesn't bother their romantic encounter. And she begins to lay eggs. She lays eggs every day for 30 days. And they all go into the pit, under the vegetation. Now, after the 30th day, she wanders off, and he never sees her again. 1 month relationship. It's over. So, 30 days. What's Dad do? Dad takes and he covers up that pit, all that sand. He puts sand all around it. And it has to be 92 degrees. Not 91, not 93. 92 degrees. You say, well, how does he know the difference? He puts his beak in there, and he's got a thermometer in his beak. And he puts that beak in there 7 days a week, 24 hours a day for 49 days. And if it gets above 92, he can't let it get above 92. If it starts getting above 92, it's getting too hot, he takes sand and gets it off. And if during the nighttime it starts to drop below 92, he takes sand and puts it back over. Then on the 49th, 50th day, these little guys, gals, come out of their shell. And when they wake up, the first thing they have to do is crawl out of this sand. It's about 2 feet, and they crawl up through that sand. And they get out there, and they shake the sand off of them. And the mama, of course, mama's gone. The daddy pays no attention to them, gives them no instruction, and every one of those little birds fly off. Nobody ever taught them how to fly. They fly immediately. And they take off in their fly, and you know what they'll do when they get older? They'll come back and do the same thing. You want to explain that to me? Chance? Can't be chance. Can't be evolution. How do I prove to somebody evolution isn't true? I'll run over a possum and take it and lay it on their porch. And I say, now look how this little guy produces. Or maybe you want to catch one if you're one of those people that dodge for possums. I don't dodge for possums. I'll dodge for a cat. I ain't dodging for a possum. About wrecked one time because of a possum. So you take that possum or you take that kangaroo, can't catch a kangaroo. Did you see that guy a few weeks ago? If you hadn't seen the video, y'all look it up, where a kangaroo attacks him and he just beats the crap out of that kangaroo. He does. He's wild for that kangaroo, and that kangaroo finally gives up. So the kangaroo, the possum, and the melee, those three things alone will show you and take you and just say, hey, just consider these things, and you'll find out that evolution is just a pipe dream. And what you need to believe is Genesis 1:1. Believe God. Believe that book, because it's always, always true. May sound simplistic, and it probably is to a great scientific mind. But if you took all the brains of, let's say, the top 100 brains of all time, who would we include in that? Well, Einstein, I think, would make everybody's list. Einstein. Many people would put Stephen Hawking in that list. If you never heard of him, great physicist, just died. Who else would we put? We'd probably put John Quincy Adams in there. You may not know much about John Quincy Adams. John Quincy Adams, without a doubt, I think, most historians believe, I believe, was the smartest intellectually guy we ever had as president. His IQ was amazing before they even measure IQ. He knew 5 or 6 or 7 languages, just brilliant. Put him in there. We'd probably put, who else would we put? Ben Franklin, Abraham Lincoln, Ben Franklin, Thomas Edison. Just take the top brilliant minds of all time, and let's hook them all together where, this is just a fantasy anyway, but we hook them all together like we do the internet so that they all become one great mind. Would they ever think of doing that? Or that? Or that? No. So let's take the 10,000 top minds. Make it 1 million if you want to. Doesn't matter. Take the best minds of all time, put them all in one room. They'll never think of this. And they'll never figure out how it happened. Because they'll tell you, well, it was chance. And you can go, somebody in that room is going to say, no, there's no way. It could be chance. Because if you want to take the smartest man who ever lived, his IQ may not be the best, but if he believes this and believes that, put me in the same room with him. That's who I want to have a conversation with. All right? Let's